For those that aren't familiar, Matt Taibbi is a liberal journalist who's been very critical of the Russia narrative against Trump, even though this man clearly does not like Trump. He's probably in a similar camp to people like Glenn Greenwald, but you probably don't care too much about that. The important thing is this guy, known to be a liberal, I think he's an editor at Rolling Stone still, he does a podcast, has said in no uncertain terms the American left has gone insane. He's right. And many of us have been calling it out for quite some time, notably people like Dave Rubin and people like me, and now people like Matt Taibbi. One by one, the dominoes fall, and people who were once liberal are now standing up saying the left has gone nuts. Interestingly, however, this article from Matt Taibbi is about the American press destroying itself. I'm not super interested in talking about journalism in this segment. We're going to be talking about the Chaz, the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, because what's going on there is a good example of the left being insane. And I'm not saying that as a dig at someone. It's not an emotional attack. I mean that quite literally. What they're doing in Capitol Hill is meaningless, performative nonsense, but many of these people literally think they're staging an uprising or a revolution. They've gone quite literally insane. Governor Cuomo of New York said to the protesters, "You've won. You've won. What do you want?" Nothing. They keep protesting. They're just smashing windows. They're just spray painting. They burned down a Wendy's the other night. I want to show you a small clip, a small segment from Matt Taibbi's article here, where he talks about the American left losing its mind. And then we'll talk about Cuomo and how the protesters don't want anything. This is very important. So listen, some people might not want to hear what's about to be said. Maybe you, if you want to support this video, share it with people and tell them to take it up with Matt Taibbi. But these people don't want to hear the truth. And it's unfortunate because every day I think people are waking up to what's really going on. And I think Matt Taibbi put it very well. He says, but police violence and Trump's daily assaults on the presidential competence standard are only part of the disaster. On the other side of the political aisle, among self-described liberals, we're watching an intellectual revolution. It feels liberating to say, after years of tiptoeing around the fact, but the American left has lost its mind. It's become a cowardly mob of upper-class social media addicts, Twitter Robespierres, who move from discipline to discipline, torching reputations and jobs with breathtaking casualness. Do you know who Robespierre is? He's the French revolutionary guy who just basically cut off everyone's head. And then eventually they cut off his head because he was just like randomly cutting off heads. It didn't mean anything. He lost his mind. Eventually, he literally lost his mind. The leaders of this new movement are replacing traditional liberal beliefs about tolerance, free inquiry, and even racial harmony with ideas so toxic and unattractive that they eschew debate, moving straight to shaming, threats, and intimidation. They are counting on the guilt-ridden, self-flagellating nature of traditional American progressives who will not stand up for themselves and who will walk to the razor voluntarily. They've conned organization after organization into empowering panels to search out thought crime. And it's established now that anything can be offensive. From a UCLA professor placed under investigation for reading Martin Luther King's letter from a Birmingham jail out loud, to a data scientist fired from a research firm, forget this, retweeting an academic study suggesting nonviolent protests may be more politically effective than violent ones. You read that right. A dude at UCLA literally read a letter from Martin Luther King Jr., and that was deemed offensive. Another guy tweeted out a study literally from an African-American man, and that was deemed to be like dismissive of black rage or something, and he got fired. Now that some people are arguing he was fired for other things, I'm not playing that game. They're just trying to get, look, maybe, but I don't buy it. He says, now this madness is coming for journalism. Beginning on Friday, June 5th, a series of controversies rocked the media. By my count, at least 8 news organizations dealt with internal uprisings. It was likely more. Most involved groups of reporters and staffers demanding the firing or reprimand of colleagues who'd made politically problematic editorial or social media decisions. The New York Times, The Intercept, Vox, the Philadelphia Inquirer, Variety, and others saw challenges to management. Now, I'm going to stop there. I don't want to get into a whole journalism thing on this one. Maybe in the future we can talk about it. But the issue here is how Matt Taibbi shows you and explains, as a liberal himself, The left has gone nuts. You didn't want to hear it from Dave Rubin. He was one of the first to come out and be like, the left left me. They said he's just a grifter who's taking money from certain from the Koch brothers and other organizations. Shut up. You didn't want to hear it because it was true. Dave Rubin was a liberal. He sat down with some conservatives. They explained to him what was going on. And then he started to see it himself. By platforming individuals who were deemed problematic, the mob came for him. And then the decision was easy. There are other people who have gone from this push from left to right. Not everybody went left to right because the left tried to destroy them for seemingly no reason. One conservative journalist, I'll leave unnamed for the most part, used to be a progressive lefty until the outrage mob came for them for literally no reason other than they looked too white. And so this person flipped. You people are nuts. You've lost your mind. For me, I've always maintained my mostly liberal positions. In fact, if you are friends with, if you're a fan of Scott Adams, you might actually see that I tweeted at him talking about systemic racism and what it means and what it really is. And I talk about these things all the time. Why? Because I'm actually the liberal. I've been my whole life. I was on the left for a long time. I don't know what that means anymore because it's mostly just about tribe. But there are certain policy positions I hold that used to align with the left. There are certain positions on racial inequality that should still align with the left. They don't. I believe in free inquiry. I believe in freedom of speech, free expression. I believe that we should be able to produce art, even if it's considered detestable. I believe people are allowed to be offensive. That includes Ricky Gervais. That includes Dave Chappelle. You got a white guy and you got a black comedian. They're allowed to be offensive. I believe that we should have free inquiry and free debate. But whatever the left is today is a mindless horde of zombies seeking out the next thing to destroy. It has nothing to do with policy. The factions now are the lunatic outrage mob and everybody else. Unfortunately, the lunatic outrage mob has a bunch of people sitting down, minding their own business, not paying attention, and just casting their vote in support of these people. You know, I talk to my friends and I say, listen, here you go, Cuomo. You don't need to protest. You won. They're still protesting. They're still destroying things. Meanwhile, the people who support these protests live in fancy mansions. Here you go. The firebrand behind Seattle's Chaz. Councilwoman and socialist Kshama Sawant, who 46 refuses to allow cops into the 6-block zone, lives in an $800,000 home, but has railed against gentrification in Seattle. Yes, it's a mindless mob. They want nothing. They don't want anything. They just want to bully people. That's what the left has become. I talk to my friends and I say, you know, I'm talking to some of my friends who are very progressive and they're like, you know, we're fighting the good fight. We're trying to end oppression, blah, blah, blah. And I said, dude, you're literally on the side with people who are banning books, literally banning art. I posted this on my Instagram. Go check out my Instagram, instagram.com/Timcast. I posted an image of a Magic the Gathering trading card game card that was recently banned for being racist. And in no way is it racist. They just didn't like the game function. It's ridiculous. Movies being banned? Yup. Books being banned? You betcha. What's the difference between banning books and burning them? When we get our books digitally and Amazon says this isn't allowed, how is that not a book burning? The goal is the same. Don't let people read or learn things that may challenge their mind or enlighten them to something that's actually going on. The books that were being burned by the Nazis were not like pro-Nazi. They were trying to destroy anything that would challenge their ideology. And now it's happening. You have these protesters who quite literally have won, and they're still demanding more. They're still protesting. Why? Take a look at what Cuomo said. Let's read this. He says, you don't need to protest. You've won. People are still out protesting. You don't need to protest. You won. You won. You accomplished your goal. Society says you're right. The police need systemic reform. That was accomplishment 1. Now go to step 2. What reform do you want? What do you want? Right now, you get people like Bill Maher. And shame on you, Bill Maher, for so much. I'm a fan. I am. I like that Bill Maher speaks up in favor of free inquiry and calls it the social outrage. But his Trump derangement syndrome is so severe. He can't see the contradictions and the cognitive dissonance. And it's becoming so insane that his last monologue made literally no sense. Bill Maher runs defense for this. He goes, right now, a bunch of people are proposing diverting some funding from the police to other programs, but they're calling it defund the police. Oh man, Democrats sure are dumb. They're going to give this one to Trump. I'm sorry, you're wrong. They are not talking about diverting funds. Maybe that's the first thing someone said. But maybe if you paid attention to the New York Times op-ed that said, yes, we literally mean abolish the police. Maybe if you actually paid attention to what Minneapolis just did, literally voting to abolish their police and to replace it with something else. Maybe if you paid attention, you'd realize they're not talking about diverting funds. But people like Bill Maher are running a defense for the insanity that these people are pushing. So while he simultaneously will call out the woke, insane left, he still doesn't know enough and ends up defending them. But this brings me to my favorite thing about the left going insane. And this includes Bill Maher. Again, I've been a fan of Bill Maher for a very long time because he always called out the moral authoritarians. Now he's only passively doing it. You know what he said in his monologue? This is funny. I love this one. In one monologue, he says, Donald Trump is going to be having rallies even though there's COVID, blah, blah, blah. Oh, okay. You want to criticize Trump and his rallies for COVID. Then he literally ends the monologue by saying, and now the CDC and the WHO are telling us that asymptomatic carriers can't transmit COVID and that you can't get it from surfaces. What are they doing? I'm like, it's so funny that you just pointed out that the CDC and WHO are saying asymptomatic carriers and touching surfaces won't transmit the disease. So why are you criticizing Trump for wanting to have a rally? There's literally protests going on. You didn't say anything about that. Trump wants to have a rally. Aha, but COVID. But also the COVID news was fake. Okay, fine. Let's be fair. You can argue there's still some absurdity, I guess, in Trump having a rally when there's still a threat of COVID, even if the threat isn't nearly as bad because the WHO is walking things back. Dude, if asymptomatic carriers can't infect other people, then they need only tell sick people they can't come in. Bill Maher, in one monologue, completely contradicts himself. Okay, mostly contradicts himself. But therein lies the problem. The left has truly gone insane. And you can see it. Cuomo says, I want systemic reform, okay? How do you define systemic reform? Let's sit down at a table with a local government, with the police, with other stakeholders. How do we redesign the police department? I'm sorry. Did someone say they wanted to redesign it? Or did they literally say abolish the police? Let's talk about the Chaz, the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. Mostly a LARP. There's quite literally people walking around dressed up like wizards and knights. And I think it's actually really funny. From what I've heard from people who have been there, it is very, very silly. And it's mostly just people being silly. However, as much as we want to point out how silly and funny a lot of people think it is, there's still businesses being destroyed. There's vandalism all up and down these streets. It's bad. They're drawing male genitals in spray paint on people's storefronts, and they're not just doing it once or twice. I mean, it's like literally everywhere. Why? What does that have to do with anything having to do with Black Lives Matter? Nothing. The left has gone insane. They're allowing this to happen. Right? You've got people here who are upset. A preacher apparently got put in a chokehold. You've got people marching with American flags, got the flag stolen. This is not freedom. There's no freedom of speech. There's no freedom of expression. It's literally a group of people who conquered this area, set up barricades with armed guards, telling certain people they're not allowed to come in and attacking them when they try, destroying the buildings. Come on, man. There's no rhyme or reason to what these people are doing. It's not just Twitter. Like Matt Taibbi says, you got Twitter Robespierres going from, discipline to discipline, destroying everything. That's true. But you've got high profile Democrats bending the knee to this and allowing it to happen. There are legitimate arguments. Police reform. I'm totally down. I am totally for it. Why? Because I've always been pretty much a liberal. But the left is just lunatics. They don't want it. They want to abolish the police. In the Chaz, one of the demands they have, and I'm not going to pretend like all of their demands are uniform, but one of the documents put out says they want to abolish the police and the court system and the attached justice apparatus, which I'm assuming means prisons. And they want all political prisoners, the protesters who attacked cops, to be released. And there's literally a flyer going around that says abolish prisons now. There is no stop. There is no point at which they're like, we are satisfied, we've won. They are just insane people doing insane things for insane reasons. And yet today, to sort of paraphrase a famous individuals, I'm liable to be deemed insane for pointing that out. Remember that famous quote? The media defends these people. Journalism protects them. And it's like Matt Taibbi said. It's, at the end of his article, he says, let me show you his conclusion, to be fair, because I think it does matter what's going on in media. He says today, no one with a salary will stand up for colleagues like Li Feng. Our brave truth tellers make great shows of shaking fists at our parody president, but not one of them will talk honestly about the fear running through their own newsrooms. People depend on us to tell them what we see, not what we think. What good are we if we're afraid to do it? And there it is. These journalists, many of them, are allowing all of this insanity to happen. It never stops. Listen, if you show me a video of a man being killed by a cop and it shouldn't have happened, and we can all as a country agree it shouldn't have happened, then it's very easy to say that shouldn't have happened. What do we got to do to make sure it doesn't happen again? Even if people can prove statistically it's not the most pressing because more people die of peanut allergies, okay, great. Then we'll deal with peanut allergies next. But right now, people are freaking out. Let's do what we can to try and solve this problem. It's unfortunate that the media focuses on this stuff. But look, if there's a problem, the problem should be solved. Simply because other problems might be worse doesn't mean we say this problem isn't bad. And if this is the one people are staring at, let's deal with it, right? Done. So what happens? Well, you might get a reasonable call for something like, hey, how about we don't allow people to kneel on necks anymore? And they technically shouldn't. Maybe we arrest the cop for some kind of, third-degree murder, for instance. But then what happens? They pass off the prosecution to Keith Ellison. He then jumps the charges up. And now legal experts and scholars are saying, we don't know if these charges will stick because they were raised to be too high. So you could have actually gotten justice. Like Cuomo said, the protesters won. Instead, you don't. You might not. We'll see what happens. Then they say, we want police reform. And you say, okay, we agree. Then they go, we want to defund the police. And you're like, okay, what does that mean? Well, we want to take some of their money away for community programs. Okay, I'll agree with that. No. It doesn't mean some. It means all. It means all their money. Okay, wait, what? No, we literally mean abolish the police. Okay, you want to abolish police? Then they say, and the courts, and the police and the courts and the prisons. Okay, what? You want to completely dismantle the entire legal system? What are you talking about? This is ridiculous. Because the media won't tell them to shut up and stop, they get away with it. Think about what's going on with these protests and what happened in the UK recently. In the UK, soccer hooligans and conservative individuals showed up to defend statues, chanting things like, where the F were you to the cops? What did the media write? Far-right hate groups attack police. And what did they write the week before? 27 officers injured in mostly peaceful protests. That was the BBC. We see these things where they say, health experts say that COVID should not stop the right to protest. And then literally an hour later, Time magazine, which published another one saying far-right groups protest defying, COVID, guidelines or whatever. The double standard is insane. The right is not allowed to do anything. But you know what? Let me tell you exactly what happened, because I've explained this before. As Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and other big techs start banning conservatives, you end up with only straight-laced, clean-looking, suit-wearing conservatives. But because they're too scared to go after the leftist mob, they continually run rampant, pushing insane things like abolish the police. No one, okay? I think it's like 84%, which is surprising still, say no to abolishing the police. 79% say let's have some reform. That's according to Cato, I believe. And we've had now some other studies like from YouGov. A plurality of every single demographic saying no to defunding the police, let alone abolishing it. The problem with Bill Maher and people like him is that they don't read the news. They don't pay attention to what the activists are calling for, so they're always late to the party. Bill Maher famously got the Covington story wrong because he has become an unlearned person. Maybe at some point, Bill Maher he's so rich and bored, he's only going through the motions now. I mean, I feel it, man. I see it. It's like, man, at a certain point, maybe you just hire someone to write it all for you. It's probably what Bill Maher is doing. When he was younger, he was probably really passionate and cared about all this stuff. And so he'd read the news and say, hey, that's nuts. Today, he gets handed some snippet and says, oh, is that what it is? I can make a joke about that. And that's it. So he's late to the party. He's wrong. And he ends up defending the woke outrage mobs. He can speak out against them, and I can respect him when he does. But think about how he came after the Covington kids. He was wrong. And that was him joining the woke outrage mob. Him, like many other liberals, while they probably have good principles somewhere deep down, they're too busy not reading the news and just believing whatever it is they hear from the woke outrage that work in these companies that allow this insanity to continue. The left has truly gone insane. Right now, the worst of the worst are burning books, figuratively, banning movies. And when I ask my friends, they say, well, there's always bad apples. I said, no, hold on. Think about it this way. You are a part of the protest. Right now, you are standing in front of a museum while crazy people ransack everything. And when I go up to you standing in front of you saying, hey, maybe you should stop those people ransacking, they say, it's just a few bad apples. What do you mean it's just a few bad apples? They're ransacking everything. Stop standing in front of them. Guess what? The same is true for police brutality. The people who say all lives matter, I agree. Let's be upset about literally everyone when they die in police custody unjustly. So there should be no one forming a line and defending bad actors. Everybody should be willing to hold their own accountable. But I'll tell you this. Right now, with George Floyd, basically every conservative was on board. You won. Congratulations, protesters. You won. They didn't care. They rioted anyway. They literally had 2A former pro-cop, gun-toting, libertarian types being like, that was wrong. Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, that was wrong. You won. They couldn't accept it because they're not actually trying to win anything specific. They're just insane. So they're just running rampant, smashing things, while other people are like, I'm just opposed to racism. And it's like, can you please then get out of my way so we can deal with those people smashing things and destroying businesses? Why do you care so much about the businesses and not the people who lost their lives? No, actually, we all care about that. We do. And we want justice. I'm glad to see this man getting arrested, but you're still standing in front of me while they're smashing buildings and burning books and banning movies. Stop doing it. They're not going to stop doing it. The left is insane. And that includes the regular liberals who aren't paying attention. Okay. I love it. You say silence is violence and silence is consent. I will say the same thing right back at you. You are mindlessly doting about. You have no idea what's going on. And you are providing cover for those who are destroying our institutions like books and movies. And you know what? It's funny when they say to me, when things get really bad, I'm afraid we're going to be on different sides here. A friend of mine said that. And I said, dude, you're literally on the side of the people who are burning books. What do you want me to say to that? Okay? I'm not going to agree with that ever. It'll never happen. You think I'm going to go out and fight for some fringe lunatics? No. I don't care what their ideology is. People have a right to free inquiry, and you're the one opposing it. Well, I don't agree with the burning of books. No, you just march with the people who do. Guess what? There's no fringe fascist group marching around people holding hands with. But I guess these people are too stupid to see that, and they think Trump really is. Well, guess what? You don't see me wearing a MAGA hat. I'm just saying, hey, guys, maybe don't burn books. And they're like, well, then you must be a conservative. Oh, okay. They've lost the plot, man. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. at timcast.net. It's the easiest way to explain this. Just go to timcast.net. I'll see you there at 4. Thanks for hanging out.